Okay, so we try again. Yes, the kids are going ham. That's what happens when you're locked indoors for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. It's getting too much. That's how we're all feeling though, right? Yes. Let's get started. So what I wanted to talk about today was paths, different paths in the program. It can be hard when you've got just a program to go off or just a problem description to go off to work out where do I need to put my conditions. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we've got this example that Elise has come up with, which is very cool. You drop the colored drop, and if it lands on the guy, he changes color. And the man can move as well. Oh, I don't know how we missed him that time. We found a bug. There we go, we got him now. That's just if you hit him on the right hand. Yeah, all right, we got a collision detection issue there, but we can fix that. So this is the program we're going to work with. Yeah, that's right, GTA 6. And think about the different paths. And we can think about it in parts. So if we try to think about this straight up, you can see the code there, right? I'm not hiding it from you, this is what we'll be doing, but there's paths everywhere. There's nested ifs and lots of ifs, and it's too much to think about all at once. So when you're trying to do this kind of thing, you should think about one part of it at a time. So the first thing I'm going to think about is this ball that's following the mouse. We'll see if that YouTube stream comes back. Do I still have... So the question we might ask ourselves is, do we need more than one path just to make that piece of code work? We need more than one path to make a circle follow the mouse. In a sense, we might, because something's changing. It's not the same thing every frame, and we're starting to think that, well, when we need to vary things along a frame between frames, then we need to have multiple paths. But in this case, we can do it just with a variable because there's already a variable that's changing forming, which is the mouse X and mouse Y. So yeah, it's a mistake to do this at 4 o'clock in the evening, I've discovered, because we're starting to lose good internet and we're stuck on NBN just like everyone else. We got HFC, which is totally terrible. And we're just going to make do with that for now. And I probably won't schedule more for 4 o'clock when the internet starts to kick up. Yeah, HFC just doesn't have the bandwidth in the neighborhood for when everyone else turns on their YouTube. The name of this game would be Game Example. That's right there. Okay, so we've already got a variable mouse X and mouse Y that's changing for us, and that's enough to do this. So we can still just do it with one path. So I'm going to show you that. So this is all we need, one path in this program for sure, from top to bottom. And that will make the ellipse that follows the mouse. Good. But when I want to make well, if we've got a bad connection for everyone, it's probably not going to make a difference to watch later because YouTube's just going to record a bad connection. We'll do our best. Two paths, because there's two different things that happen. There's one where it's following the mouse, and then there's one where it's not following the mouse. So I know for sure I'm going to need two paths, and I know for sure I'm going to need an if statement to make that happen. And so I'll start to think about how I make that if statement happen and what extra variables I need. Whenever you need an if statement, you definitely need a Boolean So if it's too bad, I can stop it. Just let me know, Cecilia. But if it's workable, we'll just keep going. If it's a Boolean, sorry, if it's a condition, then you definitely need a Boolean, right? Somewhere. And you have to ask yourself, is it a Boolean I can calculate myself? Or is it a Boolean that I have to, sorry, is it a Boolean I can calculate from what I have? Or is it a Boolean that I have to keep track of? And if I think about the Booleans I have available to me, I've got like this mouse pressed Boolean, which might be the one I'd think about using. Except that only fires off once when I press the mouse. And I need a Boolean that's going to become true when I press the mouse and then stay true. Because I need to go from the following the mouse mode to the dropping the ball mode and stay in the dropping the ball mode, not change back once I release the mouse. So that tells me I'm going to need my own Boolean to help keep track of that, because the mouse pressed is just not enough. Sometimes you think you need your own Boolean and it turns out you can get it done with another one, but we definitely need our own here. So the Boolean is going to be called falling because it's keeping track of whether the ball's falling or not. And at the start of the program, it's not. And as soon as we press the mouse, then it is. So we're looking for that event where the mouse presses. And we're going to swap that Boolean variable from false to true. Done. But now we still don't have two paths. We've set up the Boolean we're going to need for the two paths, but we haven't got it. The if statement is going to tell us, well, it's falling on the other path. And we should think immediately, oh, but once we're on the other path, we're going to need another variable, right? Which is the x and y, because that's going to change. So we'll introduce those as well. Actually, let's build up to it. I'll show you the bad way. So if we just think, okay, we're going to go from a version where it's using the mouse X and mouse Y and swap over to a version where now it's falling, I might have an if statement up here and say on one side of that branch, I'd like you to draw the ellipse where the mouse is, and on the other side of that branch, I'd like you to draw the ellipse where X and Y are. So now there's two paths our program might take. In one of them, it's got one behavior, and another one, it's running the other behavior. Okay, so, falling, I did it the wrong way around, sorry. So this is a good way to check. All of a sudden it stayed up in the top left, which wasn't what I was expecting. So I went back and thought about it and realized, it's not when it's falling that I want it to follow the ellipse. It's when it's not falling that I want it to follow the ellipse. So I got these around the wrong way. Okay, so we try again. So now when it's not falling, the ellipse at xy, and xy never got initialized, so they're 0, 0. So now I think a little bit harder about what has to happen on that path. What has to happen on that path is that when I press the click, I have to set up that x and y ready to go, and then when I'm on that path, I have to be reducing the y, or increasing the y, sorry. So those are two extra things I have to do. One on the event, and the other one on that path, but only on that path. The x and y only have to change once we've gone into that mode and we're doing that path. X stays the same, but y goes up by 1 each time we draw a frame in that mode, in that path. And now when I click, the ball goes absolutely nowhere. Because I put it in the wrong path. Goes up there, still got the wrong path on my brain. And we run. If I go back to the game, I can see that I'm falling too slow, but I've got the two different paths. I've got that part of the behavior. Notice that when I click again, it goes straight back to the top. Is that what I want? It's not what this game does. Okay, so I might need some new paths. Let's think about the logic here. Of the paths that might be going on here. I've got a mode where I'm following the mouse, that's definitely one path. I've got another one where I'm down, and that's another path. notice that the mouse behavior, I'm clicking right now, the mouse behavior changes when I'm on the other path. And that means I can't just use, I have to have more than one path down here in the mouse pressed as well. Can I move the curly braces underneath the void for aesthetic purposes? No, I cannot, and I never will. So I need to use the two different paths in the mouse pressed as well, because there needs to be different behavior when the mouse is following, click causes it to go down, then when it's falling, click does absolutely nothing. So I've got to introduce the paths here, and the paths are based on the exact same Boolean, and in this case it doesn't need to have a else case, because I've decided that when it's, sorry, that's a not falling again. Ah, perfect. It doesn't need to have an else case, because when it's falling, I don't do anything at all on a mouse click. Notice here I've used this cool not symbol, which you might not have seen much of yet, but it takes any true and turns it into a false, and any false and turns it into a true. And so we read it as not, because it makes this line read as if not falling, do this. It's a really good way to write this expression, because the alternative would be to write if falling, do nothing else, do this one. And that's a bit ugly. So we change it to if not falling instead. Then we don't need the else. So I think I'm going to get the behavior I want now, which is that I click, and now when I click, nothing's happening. Good, good, good. So I'm getting close to the behavior. And I still only have two paths in the program, do I? Kind of. I got two Booleans that are helping me keep track of paths, but I've got two paths in the draw algorithm, and I've got two paths in the mouse pressed algorithm. Okay, the last thing I need to do to make this the ball behavior work is that when the ball drops down below a certain space, it should come back and start following the mouse again. So that's another path, right? Is it another path? Let's think about it. We've got a path for I'm following the mouse. We've got a path for I'm falling. And just in an instant there, just one tiny instant, when we slipped below the line, there was another behavior, and that was that we switched modes again. And that behavior is different to any other behavior. At this time of the program, we didn't go from falling to not falling. At this time of the program, we didn't go from falling to not falling. But as soon as we got below that line, we did go from falling to not falling. So for one frame, just one frame, we need to have different behavior. And what is that frame? That's the frame when we notice that the ball is dropped below this line. So I've got to find that frame, and I've got to make sure just on that frame I get another type of behavior, a different type of behavior. So how do I know where that frame is? Well, I've got a variable for the ball position. I've got a variable, well, I know maybe where this line is. I might say it's at 600, for example. And I can compare those two numbers to see if the ball is under here. I can compare the position of the ball with the number 600 and see if it's gone below. So that gives me a Boolean. I've already got the variables I need to calculate the Boolean that I need. Now I've chosen 620 because that's when the top of the ball drops below the line, instead of the middle of the ball dropping below the line. So now this branch here will run on any frame where the ball has gone below position 620. And as soon as it does, we say we're going to switch from the one mode to the other. We're going to turn falling back to false. So now we should see it drop, and I'm clicking and nothing's happening. Then we drop it down below 600 maybe, and it's dropped, and it's gone immediately back to following the mouse. Okay, so that's introduced another path. But notice that it's a path that's separate from the first path. They're not they don't rely on each other. They're just there. But there's something strange going on here. Well, there's not something strange going on. This logic works just fine. But what's happening right now inside the program while I'm moving around down here is that y is greater than 620. And so it's changing falling to false over and over again, which I don't really want it to. Falling already is false. It would make much more sense if this line of code didn't happen when falling was already false. So I've got two choices there to fix up that flow, which is a bit funny, is I can say the Boolean here for turning falling to false is not just that y is greater than 620, it's also that we were falling already. And so this expression here is a slightly more complicated Boolean expression. That won't change the meaning of our program. But it will, I guess it's neater, logically makes more sense. These things matter to us as programmers. And it also means that if we change something in the future, a bug won't just appear. Let's say, for example, the logic of changing falling became more complicated and it could start to mess up what happens down here. All right. The next thing I want to show you is that this thing with the and falling is actually exactly like, there's a equivalence here. What's true in this section of the code? In this section of the code, we know for sure that falling is true, because the only way we could get into this section of the code was by having a true appear in this, this variable. So if we wanted to do something that happened only when y was greater than 620 and only when falling, we could do an if like this, and that works fine. Or we could put a simpler if inside here. And this if only triggers when y is greater than 620 and falling is true. So it's doing the exact same thing as this one here. And I think that's a neat trick. It's a neat thing to recognize. And you'll find you get the choice when you're writing your programs maybe to do these what we call nested if statements. An outside if statement with another if statement inside it. Sometimes you have to use nested if statements. Other times you have a choice between the nested if statements like these ones or the more complicated Boolean expression like we had before. Let's just check that this is going to do the same thing as before. And we're going to wait until it goes below and then hopefully it'll reset back up. Yep, and off we go. Okay. So just that behavior got us to, I think, some, well, it's not complicated, but it's interesting conditions code. And working out that you might have a path, different paths within different paths is a hard thing, I think, to go from 0 to answer on. Realizing that the same variable might be used to discriminate between paths in two different parts of the program is something that can be hard to go from 0 to answer on. So I wanted to try and give you an insight into how I might go from the question I've got to what if statements I need to use to make it work. That's exactly what we did there. Once we've done that though, we really want to come up with programs that read nicely. So I might not have been able to go straight from the problem to a written program that reads nicely. I might have had to think, how many paths do I need for this part? Let's put them in now. How many paths do I need for this part? Put this in. But once it's here, it should read like a piece of, well, it should read like instructions. This one does because I chose good variable names, right? It says if falling, draw an ellipse here, and if the y is greater than 620, we're no longer falling. Increase y. If y is not falling, so if not falling, draw the ellipse where the mouse is, and we're done. So that's a very good question, yes. Well, let me show you that. Something else people do a lot is this, which is perfectly correct, it works, but that's a waste of time. Remember that equals is something that can take two values and turn them into a Boolean for us. So when we had 5 equal 5, it would turn that into a true, and when we had 5 equal 4, it would turn that into a false. Well, it works on Booleans too. So if you've got true equal true, you get back true, and if you've got false equal true, you get back false. But that's a total waste of time, because the correct answer for falling equals true is always the exact same value as is already in falling. And because we think of ifs not as needing an equals in them, or not as needing a less than or equal to in them, they just need a Boolean, any old Boolean that we can come up with, then using the variable falling all by itself is perfectly okay. And down here in this one, this is the equivalent of saying if falling equals false, which again, might make some logically more sense to you, because you're saying, well, if the variable falling is equal to false, but the programmer's way of doing that is to say, please just inspect the variable falling and swap the condition. Which is fine, chat away, but any questions for me? Okay, cool. Let's think about this little man now. The little man moves on key presses. So we want to try and, I'm going to use some time here just to talk about the difference between events and conditions on events, or conditions on variables. Ooh. So one way to make this guy move, I'm just going to draw him as a square because I don't want to spend time on making him look pretty. I'll at least do that. Let's draw him. I'm going to put a comment in here now because comment's useful. Drop, so that we know that the ellipse is the drop. And now I'll put a comment down here to say draw box carrier, which is the name for this little character because of a game Elise wrote that we use somewhere else. He's just going to be a square. Rectangle, but he didn't need a position. So all of a sudden I realize I need 2 positions. Int bcx, int bcy, and we'll start them off. Bcy equals, let's say, 520, and bcx equals width divided by 2, and I'll draw him at those positions, bcy, x, bcy, and that means it needs to be 80 by 80 to fit. All right, there's little BC. So we want to be able to move BC left and right. What that means is that when the A key is pressed, I want the X to go to reduce. When the D key is pressed, I want the X to increase. And that's all. I don't need to worry about any others because you can't go up and down. So we know that when a key is pressed, we get this key pressed event happen. And that's the most natural way to do key pressed functionality. I can go into the key pressed and I can say, well, let's just assume any old key's pressed and we'll make X, BCX go a bit smaller. And as a starter, that'll just make him go to the left whenever I press any old key, which is what's happening. But I only want it to happen on A, and I actually want it to happen a bit faster than that. So that means in the key pressed event, there's not just one path. The key pressed event with one path fires off for every single key pressed. And I don't want that. I want a key pressed event that sometimes does nothing and sometimes moves him left, which means I do need 2 paths in here. And if I need 2 paths, I need a Boolean to help me work out which path I'm on. Do I have the variables I need to work this one out? Well, I do. I need to know based on which key I've pressed, and the key I've pressed is already in the system as a variable called key. So if I press the key A, then there will be an A in this variable, and that variable equal A will come up as true, so we will follow this path. And on this path, I want BCX equals BCX minus 10. So now when I press A, it moves relatively quickly to the left. But if I press any other key, nothing happens because there are two paths in the key press. If I wanted to move right on the other one, then I can probably see already that I want if key equals D, and that will get me what I want. Okay, we don't. No. Maybe that stupid via thing was half the problem. You still good? Yep, cool. I just got booted off the VPN from work, so just wanted to make sure it didn't drop everything. We run this again, and now I can go left and right. I don't know what those people are writing, but that doesn't seem cool. Now, the thing I wanted to show you here is that this sequence here of if and then another if creates, at the top one, it creates a path that does nothing and a path that moves left, and then it comes back. Then it creates another path that does nothing and a path that moves right. So instead, we should have, well, an alternative here is to use an if-else, because whenever we have these paths where one side's doing nothing and then we've got one choice or another choice, then instead we could just else if on that one. And remember I said that makes this seem a bit more logical, right? It's clear that the two choices are happening, but not anything else. And that would be the exact same behavior. And I don't mind which one you would do if you were programming this yourself, but I wanted to show you that those two were equivalent. Okay. So that was all the stuff I wanted to cover. This is a much bigger program here over the left and a lot more to show off. We might see if we can put together a pre-recorded thing to show off everything in this and the nested and complicated booleans you can get to. But I wanted to have a discussion about paths, and I wanted to have a discussion about combining nested ifs inside ifs and if-elses. And this was a great example to do that. Okay, so someone's chucking code everywhere. Someone's making inappropriate comments. Is there anything for me? No, nothing else for me. There's your code. Pause. Pause. Good. No, I'm not going to put the code on iLearn. This is it's all here on the stream, and the textbook has examples and all kinds of stuff. Remember, this is not officially a lecture or anything like that, so I'm not trying to. You won't see things appearing on iLearn. Okay. To move little boxman vertically, you would fiddle with the BCY instead of fiddling with BCX, because we're using that in the Y slot of the rect function. Yes, we can make collision check in real physics, and maybe that's something we could do in another video. I won't try and do that right now, though. If we do the pre-recorded video for the rest of this one, then we'll definitely talk about the collision detection, because that's a very interesting case of if statements. You've got to find the exact frame where the ball intersects with the man and run a different path again. You've got to run a different piece of code to account for the collision. Ah. All right, folks, we have something else coming through. Thanks for dropping by. I'll try and work out whether the lagginess was something on my side or just the time of day, and maybe readjust in the future. But we'll leave it there for now, I think. Yeah, the box carrier has a name. His name's Box Carrier. Box Carrier. All right. Cheers, guys and gals. I shall see you next time.